Today on the Downsized News, big changes are coming from people using GLP-1s to treat the disease of obesity, from new FDA-approved rules and global WHO guidance to state crackdowns, counterfeit Ozempic, and a court decision that could speed up semaglutide generics. We'll break down what actually matters for you and your medication.
Welcome back to the Downsized News. It's Monday, December 8th, 2025. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you're here. I'm Laraine Durham, and I've lost over 50 pounds using the GLP-1 medication tirzepatide.
And I'm Christopher Durham. I've lost 100 pounds with GLP-1s, and this is where we talk about what that's really like, the wins, the hard days, and the science behind it all.
Each week, we'll bring you the latest GLP-1 news, from Mounjaro, Zepbound, Wegovy, and Ozempic to the new treatments on the horizon. We look at the research, the policies, and the real stories that affect all of us who are treating the disease of obesity.
If you're new to our channel, welcome. And if you've been with us for a while, welcome back. We're not doctors, and this is not medical advice. We're just sharing what we've learned along the way.
We post new videos every day to help you stay informed, encouraged, and supported. So grab your water, hit that like button, and we'll get started. Your GLP-1 update starts now.
Story number one, federal regulators are sounding the alarm after uncovering counterfeit Ozempic circulating inside the legitimate U.S. drug supply chain. In a notice released this week, the FDA confirmed that dozens of fake Ozempic 1 milligram pens were seized after being distributed outside of Novo Nordisk's authorized supply system, but still ended up in U.S. pharmacies. The agency says the discovery underscores a serious and widening problem: counterfeit GLP-1 medications slipping into the same supply chain Americans rely on for their real prescriptions. The counterfeit pens were labeled with a real lot number, PAR1229, which makes them harder for consumers and retailers to detect. The FDA says the key giveaway is the placement of the EXP lot text on the pen. On authentic Ozempic pens, the text is printed above those details. Anyone who sees the label printed in the wrong location should stop using the pen immediately. The agency says people who received Ozempic with that lot number directly through Novo Nordisk's patient assistance program can continue using it. Those pens are genuine. But for everyone else, the FDA is urging patients, pharmacies, wholesalers, and clinicians to examine any Ozempic on their shelves and remove anything with the counterfeit labeling pattern. 6 adverse events have been reported in connection with this lot, but all of them were tied to authentic Ozempic, and none have been linked to the counterfeit versions. The FDA's investigation is active, and laboratory testing is underway to determine what is inside the seized pens and whether they pose contamination or safety risks. The agency says it learned of the issue in November when Novo Nordisk notified regulators that counterfeit product bearing the legitimate lot number had made its way into commercial channels. This is not an isolated incident. Federal investigators seized hundreds of counterfeit Ozempic units earlier this year under a different lot and serial number, and another seizure occurred in late 2023. In those cases, counterfeit needles, labels, boxes, and patient information were also discovered with no guarantee of sterility or proper manufacturing conditions. Pharmacies are being advised to purchase Ozempic only from authorized distributors. Anyone, retail or wholesale, who is unsure about the authenticity of a shipment is urged to contact Novo Nordisk directly. The FDA is asking patients to obtain Ozempic only with a valid prescription from a state-licensed pharmacy and to inspect the pen before using it. Counterfeit GLP-1s have been a growing concern as demand outpaces supply and criminals try to exploit the market. With the discovery of fake products inside the legitimate supply chain, federal officials say they are coordinating with Novo Nordisk and law enforcement partners to track, identify, and remove any additional counterfeit Ozempic that may be circulating. The FDA says its investigation will continue until all affected products are found, and it is urging anyone who experiences side effects or encounters a suspicious product to file a report through the MedWatch program so regulators can move quickly to protect the nation's drug supply. So it's important to note this is not talking about compounding at all. This is literally somebody making fake Ozempic.
And somebody who knew the lot numbers of actual Ozempic. So that is also disturbing. Right. You just can't be too careful. And I wonder how they even discovered it, because it was just the placement of the expiration date on the label.
Yeah, and there's some other things, and I'll cut pictures of all this in so everybody can see how this works. But just be careful where you're getting your medication from, and then check if it doesn't look right.
Even if I was getting it from my local drugstore, it could be fake. That's disturbing.
That is disturbing.
In story number 2, the World Health Organization took a notable step this past Monday, releasing new global guidance on the use of GLP-1 medications for adults living with obesity. The recommendations, published in JAMA, outline when long-term continuous treatment with medicines such as semaglutide, liraglutide, and tirzepatide may be appropriate. For people who have spent years navigating limited access, stigma, and inconsistent care, the message from the WHO is unmistakable. Obesity is a chronic, relapsing disease that deserves lifelong treatment and support. This update builds on the WHO's earlier action in September when the organization added GLP-1 therapies to its essential medicines list for certain high-risk groups with type 2 diabetes. Now the conversation expands to obesity itself, with the WHO suggesting that these medicines may be used long-term in adults who are not pregnant. The recommendation is still conditional, reflecting unanswered questions about long-term safety, durability of treatment, cost, and the ability of health systems around the world to manage the rising demand. Even so, the shift represents a significant moment in how global institutions frame obesity care. The WHO is equally clear about the limits of medication. GLP-1s alone will not reverse the global obesity epidemic, which now affects more than 1 billion people and is projected to reach 2 billion by 2030. The disease of obesity contributes to heart problems, diabetes, some cancers, and poorer outcomes during infectious illnesses. The economic consequences are also staggering, with global costs of obesity expected to reach $3 trillion annually within just a few years. The WHO stresses that these medicines work best as part of a larger ecosystem of support that includes healthier eating patterns, regular movement, counseling, and access to care throughout a person's life. The guidance also acknowledges something many patients already know. When hunger calms and food stops feeling overwhelming, it becomes easier to follow healthy steps we've been encouraged to take for years. Many people on GLP-1s describe a sense of control over food that they never had before, and the new guideline reflects that lived reality while urging countries to build systems that support behavior change alongside medication. The WHO also emphasizes the importance of maintaining strength and physical function during weight loss, noting that thoughtful activity and nutrition remain essential. Access remains one of the biggest challenges. WHO points to high prices, limited supply, and uneven availability across countries, warning that without careful planning, these therapies could widen inequalities rather than reduce them. The guidance urges governments to create fair and affordable pathways to access so that people with the highest medical need are reached first. This guideline was developed through extensive evidence evaluation and input from people living with obesity, and the WHO plans to update it regularly as new information emerges. Over the next year, the organization will work with member states to establish a transparent framework for determining who should be prioritized and how national systems can reboot their approach to prevention, treatment, and long-term care. For individuals using GLP-1s or hoping to start, this past Monday's announcement carries real weight. It signals a shift in global thinking toward treating obesity early and directly rather than waiting for complications to appear. And for many people who have been asking for support, acknowledgement, and access, that shift may be the most important part of all.
So it's a little late to the party, but happy to see them here.
You know, WHO recognizes obesity as a disease, and they want people to have access to the treatment. So
I love that.
All good.
Story number 3, a new procedure designed to help people maintain their weight after stopping GLP-1 medications is showing stronger than expected early results. Fractal Health has released 6-month data from its open-label Reveal-1 study, and the numbers suggest that a single Revita procedure may help stabilize weight and blood sugar long after GLP-1 therapy ends. This is a challenging group of patients. Before entering the study, participants had lost an average of 24% of their total body weight, more than 50 pounds each, on medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide. They had been on a GLP-1 anywhere from 5 months to 5 years. In published studies of GLP-1 withdrawal alone, people typically regain about 10% of their body weight within months of stopping. In REVEAL-1, that didn't happen. After receiving a single Revita procedure and coming off their GLP-1, the 17 participants with full 6-month data saw a mean weight change of just 1.5%, essentially stable weight over half a year, instead of the rapid regain normally seen. Blood sugar control stayed stable as well. HbA1c values changed by only 0.04% compared with the 0.4% increase observed in the GLP-1 withdrawal extension of the Step 1 trial. For people who have struggled with metabolic instability after stopping these drugs, that difference is meaningful. Safety looked favorable too. Among the 22 people in the study, there were no serious adverse events, and 36% experienced only mild, short-lived symptoms typical of routine endoscopy. These results come as patients, prescribers, and payers continue to search for options once a GLP-1 is stopped. Many people simply cannot stay on these medications forever, whether due to cost, insurance coverage, or side effects, and most quickly regain some of the weight they lost. The idea that a single procedure might offer a more durable alternative explains why this data is drawing so much attention. Frequent viewers may remember our video from Obesity Week with Fractal Health CEO Harith Rajagopalan, MD, PhD, who explained how Revita targets the metabolic dysfunction in the duodenum, the same area where GLP-1s help. These new results line up closely with what he described, and there is much more coming. In 2026, Fractal plans to release January of 2026, they'll release randomized 6-month results from the Remain-1 midpoint cohort. Q2 2026, they'll release 1-year REVEAL-1 results. Q3 2026, they'll release 1-year Remain-1 midpoint results. And then at the end of the year in 2026, pivotal 6-month Remain-1 data and a potential FDA filing. So by the end of the year, they could be filing. Make sure you stay tuned to the Downsized for a follow-up interview with the CEO of Fractal Health. In the coming weeks, we'll be talking to him, and he will walk us through these results and the potential of this new procedure. If you caught our interview with him, fascinating guy.
Yeah, small study, 22 people had the procedure.
So for those of you who didn't catch it, basically what this is endoscopy. So similar to a colonoscopy, but the other end, you go in and it essentially cauterizes part of your intestines, theoretically making, and I'm not a doctor, making it create things a little differently and process things a little differently. And if you go back and watch the video, Harith explains it much better than I can.
It seems to be working for these patients that signed up for the procedure, so we'll have to stay tuned for more results. In story number 4, Novo Nordisk is preparing to take its next-generation obesity drug, CagriSema, into a new frontier, pediatric care. According to reporting from Reuters, the company will launch a late-stage global clinical trial in January 2026 to test the drug in children and adolescents as young as 8 years old. The trial is expected to enroll roughly 460 participants across nearly 100 study sites worldwide, including locations in the United States, China, and Europe. It will examine how CagriSema affects body weight over 68 weeks, with children receiving either the combination therapy, one of its components, or a placebo. CagriSema pairs semaglutide, the active ingredient in popular medications for diabetes and obesity, with cagrilinotide, an amylin analog that may enhance appetite control. Novo Nordisk hopes the two together will deliver stronger metabolic benefits than semaglutide alone. The decision to move into pediatric trials comes even as earlier adult studies of CagriSema delivered mixed weight loss results that fell short of investor hopes. Novo Nordisk has pointed to other potential advantages observed in adults, including reductions in blood pressure, as signs that the therapy may offer health benefits. The move reflects a larger shift in how drug makers and health systems are thinking about obesity, not as an adult condition that emerges late in life, but as a chronic disease that often begins in childhood. If CagriSema proves safe and effective in young patients, it could open the door to earlier medical intervention, though experts caution that questions about long-term safety, growth, and development will be critical. The trial marks an important moment in the rapidly evolving field of obesity medicine. With global rates of childhood obesity rising, the results of the study could help shape the next generation of treatment guidelines and regulatory decisions.
So, right now, really, what, semaglutide's approved for people under 18, right?
Glutide, so Wegovy, I think you can get starting at age 16, maybe younger.
I thought it was 12.
It might be 12. And Zepbound, you have to be 18 for Zepbound. So they're trying this with patients as young as 8 years old, which honestly seems young to me. But, you know, if a child has obesity, why not treat it at that age?
In story number 5, the FDA is preparing to overhaul how new medicines and medical products are approved, a shift that could change the pace at which new therapies reach the market. The agency plans to move away from its long-standing expectation of 2 pivotal clinical trials for most drugs and instead rely on a single well-designed trial as the new default. For GLP-1 users treating the disease of obesity, the implications could be significant. A one-trial standard has the potential to speed up the arrival of next-generation medications, including oral GLP-1s, triple hormone therapies, and other metabolic treatments now in development. Many of these drugs promise better tolerability, easier access, or lower prices. A faster approval pathway could help them reach patients sooner, especially as the field expands beyond injectables and into oral or combination therapies that might meet different needs. But the shift could also introduce new concerns. GLP-1 medications aren't taken for a few weeks. They are long-term treatments for a chronic relapsing disease. Fewer pre-approval trials may reduce the amount of long-term safety and durability data available before these drugs hit the market. That matters for people who will rely on these therapies for years, not months. The FDA's move reflects an effort to streamline development, cut costs, and respond to public pressure for faster access to therapies that address widespread conditions. But it also raises questions about oversight and evidence, especially in obesity care, a field where patient demand is high, marketing is powerful, and real-world safety data takes time to unfold. For GLP-1 users, for us, the bottom line is complicated. This change could mean more options and more innovation sooner, but it also increases the responsibility of regulators, clinicians, and researchers to track long-term outcomes carefully once new therapies enter the marketplace. In short, the decision could accelerate the evolution of obesity treatment, but it will require careful stewardship to ensure speed doesn't leave patients exposed to unknown risks. So, faster to market, but we're not learning quite as much as we have been.
It has good and bad points for sure. In story number 6, Pennsylvania is preparing for a major change in access to GLP-1 medications at the start of the new year. According to reporting from 90.5 WESA, Pittsburgh's NPR station, the state has quietly decided that beginning in January, Medicaid will no longer pay for drugs such as Ozempic and Wegovy when they are prescribed for obesity alone. Coverage will continue for diabetes and other qualifying conditions, but adults who use the medications strictly for weight loss will lose their benefit unless they fall under new, narrower criteria. WESA's Tom Reese reports that the shift is intended to manage ballooning Medicaid costs, which, quote, have been driven higher by the popular but pricey medication, end quote. Internal state budget documents show that Pennsylvania expects to spend more than $1.3 billion on GLP-1s this year, a steep climb from the $223 million spent in 2022 when coverage was limited to diabetes. Once medical assistance expanded eligibility to include obesity in 2023, the bill surged to $650 million over the next 2 years before crossing the billion-dollar threshold in 2025. The policy change was outlined last week in a bulletin from Medicaid Director Sally Kozak and communicated directly to some beneficiaries through form letters. One letter reviewed by WESA states, drugs containing a GLP-1 receptor agonist for the treatment of overweight or obesity will no longer be covered unless you have a condition for which GLP-1 receptor agonist remains a covered prescription drug benefit. The notice informs recipients that coverage will end on December 31st unless a new prior authorization is approved. The decision is already generating political debate. WESA quotes State Representative Arvin Kinnat, an emergency physician and Democrat from McCandless, who called the move penny-wise and pound foolish. arguing that GLP-1s help prevent severe illnesses and could ultimately reduce healthcare costs tied to heart disease, kidney disease, and other metabolic complications. Venkat said the state has not communicated clearly with the public and added, if DHS is restricting access, they owe it to the public to explain what their rationale is. Some lawmakers, however, support the restrictions. State Senator Scott Martin, the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, told WESA earlier this year that there are, quote, other ways that people can engage in healthier living, end quote, without taxpayers funding what he described as a magic shot. In a statement to the station after the policy was finalized, Martin said it was, quote, a step in the right direction, end quote. The Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee within Pennsylvania's Department of Human Services has signaled this outcome months ago. Minutes from its April meeting cited by WESA stated that the current price and utilization of GLP-1s has contributed to budget growth at a rate that is unsustainable. The committee's data showed just how quickly costs escalated once obesity coverage was added. Pennsylvania is not alone. Other states, including Wisconsin and Rhode Island, have explored similar limitations, while states such as New Mexico, Connecticut, North Carolina, Texas, and North Dakota already restrict Medicaid coverage of GLP-1s to diabetes and a small number of related conditions. Some Pennsylvania lawmakers have also pushed alternative strategies. Representative Dan Frankel, a Democrat from Squirrel Hill who chairs the House Health Committee, told WESA that GLP-1s offer extraordinary benefits, but remain a, quote, budget buster. Frankel said efforts to regulate drug pricing, including subscription models or utility-style oversight, have stalled, leaving few immediate options to slow spending. People under 21 will still be able to access GLP-1s for obesity under Medicaid rules, and adults with other approved medical conditions remain eligible. WESA spoke with Kyle Fisher of the Pennsylvania Health Law Project, who said individuals who believe they received a notice error may be able to appeal. Fisher told the station, if they have a condition other than weight loss that the GLP-1s are approved for, they should certainly work with their clinicians. As Pennsylvania enters 2026, the state is confronting the same challenge facing Medicaid programs nationwide, balancing the promise of medications that can dramatically improve health against costs that continue to accelerate faster than the systems designed to pay for them. These are expensive medicines.
Well, and it's
busting the budgets of states nationwide.
And it's interesting that you have states basically eliminating the coverage at the same time that the White House is saying we're going to expand coverage. And the challenge, and it's part of what we just don't know about the White House's proposal at this point, is all the rules, right? How's it going to all work out? So they're saying Medicaid gets expanded. We hope it does. Medicaid expansion has to be accepted state by state, though. So the state of North Carolina, state of Wyoming, whoever it is, and every state doesn't have the exact same coverage.
Well, I guess the states have to make their budget based upon the current prices of these medications. The current prices for the prescriptions have not come down. Now we have the direct pay models from Novo and Lilly, but those don't go through.
It doesn't impact it.
It doesn't impact Medicaid.
So still a lot of details to come on how all of that will impact this conversation. We just don't know, but we look forward to seeing it. Story number 7, Connecticut is escalating its efforts to protect consumers as demand for GLP-1s continues to soar. On Wednesday, the Connecticut Attorney General's office announced it had issued cease and desist letters to 3 businesses in Avon, Brookfield, and Danbury, Connecticut, after investigators found them advertising non-FDA approved versions of GLP-1 weight loss injections. It marks the latest step in a months-long effort to stop unlicensed and potentially dangerous products being marketed as cheaper alternatives to drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound. Attorney General William Tong made the state's position clear, saying there are no generic GLP-1 injections available in the United States, and anyone claiming otherwise is not telling the truth and exposing patients to potentially unsafe bootleg drugs, he said. The letters were sent to CT Weight Loss Shot in Danbury, Vigorous 360 Wellness in Brookfield, and Radiance Med Spa in Avon. Investigators say those businesses advertised injections described as generic or equivalent versions of semaglutide or tirzepatide Two allegedly implied the drugs were FDA approved, and one promoted a shot combining both ingredients. The Attorney General's office also found that none of the businesses were run by licensed medical professionals. There were no doctors, no nurses, and no clinical oversight. Tong called them clinics owned or controlled by lay people, selling injections made entirely outside the federal drug safety system. He said the state will not hesitate to take further action to address deceptive practices. A major source of confusion in cases like this is the public misunderstanding of what the word generic actually means. Under U.S. law, a drug cannot become a generic until the brand name medication's patents and exclusivity periods expire. Semaglutide and tirzepatide remain under those protections, which means a true generic is not legally possible right now. And even after a patent expires, a generic must go through its own FDA approval process and prove it is an exact match to the original drug in its formulation, dosage, absorption, and manufacturing standards. Compounded medications sit in an entirely different category. A compounded drug is a one-off formulation created by a licensed pharmacy for an individual prescription, usually when a commercially available version doesn't meet a specific need. These products are regulated by states rather than the FDA, but the FDA still requires compounding pharmacies to source ingredients from its approved green list. When a business uses the word generic to describe a compounded injection that has never gone through the FDA's approval pathway, it is misusing a legally defined term, and it is intentionally attempting to confuse or deceive its patients. The rise of these injections has been fueled by cost pressures, supply shortages, and widespread consumer interest. Connecticut alone spent between $34 and $40 million last year on GLP-1 prescriptions for state employees. That environment has created openings for businesses offering unlicensed products at lower prices, often with ingredients sourced from overseas manufacturers with inconsistent safety oversight. State officials have been pushing back for nearly a year. In February, Tong joined more than 36 states and territories urging the FDA to take stronger action against unlicensed GLP-1 producers. In May, he sent warning letters to clinics and med spas telling them to stop marketing GLP-1 drugs made by compounding pharmacies after the FDA flagged concerns about dosing errors, salt form ingredients imported from poorly inspected facilities, and adverse events that required medical intervention. And in August, Connecticut reached a settlement with Triggered Brand, a Florida company that sold compounded GLP-1 injections to state residents, resulting in an $18,500 penalty that could rise to $300,000 if the company violates the agreement again. Investigators also began examining an online marketplace in China that was selling research-grade GLP-1s to American buyers. The company has since told the state that it is no longer marketing these products. Connecticut's message is straightforward. When a business claims to sell a generic version of a drug whose patents have not expired and whose ingredients have not been reviewed or approved by the FDA, the claim itself is a red flag. And when that same business has no licensed medical professionals involved in prescribing or administering the product, the risk is even more stark. The state is making it clear that misleading marketing and unregulated injections will not be tolerated, especially as the GLP-1 landscape grows more crowded and more vulnerable to unethical operators.
So if you're getting your GLP-1s from a med spa, I'd ask, where's the doctor, and where are you getting your medications?
First of all, there should be real prescribers.
Yeah, there's no the ones that have been cited in Connecticut had no doctors or medical professionals on site. That's just wrong, and that's just wrong.
These are prescription drugs that are legitimate drugs, and there should be a real prescriber on site. Connecticut's not messing around, so these companies cannot advertise them as something they aren't. If it's a compounded medication, it has to say that's what it is. It can't say that it's FDA-approved branded medication. It can't.
Yep. In story number 8, China is preparing to make a major shift in access to GLP-1 medications. Beginning January 1st, 2026, Eli Lilly's Mounjaro will be added to the country's state health insurance list for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. The decision means that one of the world's most in-demand metabolic medications will soon come with significant cost reductions for tens of millions of people who rely on the public insurance system in China. Mounjaro launched earlier this year in China and entered a market already shaped by drugs like Ozempic. Adding it to the national reimbursement catalog signals that Chinese health officials expect the medication to play a central role in diabetes management. It also places pressure on Lilly's competitors, including Novo Nordisk and domestic manufacturers, who may now need to rethink pricing and strategy to remain competitive. Analysts expect the lower insurance-negotiated price to increase demand quickly. Some predict that broader affordability could also increase off-label interest in the drug for weight management, something Chinese regulators have not approved but will likely monitor closely as prescriptions rise. For Lilly, the move is both an opportunity and a challenge. China is one of the world's largest diabetes markets, and insurance coverage could dramatically expand reach. At the same time, the deep price cuts required for the inclusion in the state insurance program could limit profit margins, especially as more competitors enter the space and China continues to negotiate aggressively on drug pricing. The decision highlights just how fast the global landscape for GLP-1 therapies is changing. Countries everywhere are grappling with the cost of diabetes and obesity care, and China's move suggests that greater access paired with tighter pricing controls may become the new normal.
Big move in China.
I didn't realize there were China was one of the biggest biggest diabetic areas.
Basically, there's so many people living
is
there.
it just a function of so many people?
It is. It is. Story number 9, a new study is raising an unexpected question. Could GLP-1 medications actually help people with epilepsy have fewer seizures? The research, titled Seizure Recurrence After GLP-1 Receptor Agonist Initiation in Adults with Epilepsy, was published by the journal Epilepsy by Maj Abu Arab and colleagues. And while the study doesn't prove cause and effect, the results offer an intriguing early signal. The team reviewed electronic health records from hospitals around the world, covering more than 20 years of data. They focused on adults who had both epilepsy and type 2 diabetes and who were starting a new diabetes medication. Some began a GLP-1 medicine such as semaglutide, tirzepatide, liraglutide, or others in that class. Others started different drugs like insulin, sulfonylureas, SGLT2 inhibitors, or DPP4 inhibitors. To make the comparison as fair as possible, the researchers matched each GLP-1 user with a similar person taking one of the other medications. In the end, they compared more than 8,000 matched pairs. Then they watched what happened next. Over roughly a year and a half of follow-up, people who started a GLP-1 medication had slightly fewer repeat seizures. About 34% of GLP-1 users had another seizure during the study period, compared with 36% of those taking other diabetes drugs. That may sound like a small difference, but when the researchers looked at timing, the gap widened. People on GLP-1s went a median of 1,327 days before another seizure. The comparison group made it to 891 days. In other words, on average, people taking a GLP-1 had longer stretches of time without a seizure. There were other differences too. People on GLP-1s had fewer hospitalizations and fewer deaths during the study period. Severe events like status epilepticus were also somewhat less common, although not by a large margin. When the researchers repeated their analysis using only epilepsy-specific diagnostic codes, the results stayed consistent, which gave them more confidence in the pattern they were seeing. The authors point out that there are biological reasons this could make sense. GLP-1 receptors exist in parts of the brain involved in seizure activity, and earlier lab studies have suggested these receptors may help protect brain cells and reduce inflammation. It is also possible that the overall health improvements that come with GLP-1 medications, better blood sugar control, weight loss, reduced inflammation, could indirectly help the brain stay more stable. At the same time, the researchers are extremely careful about what these results can and cannot tell us. This was not a clinical trial. It was a look back at medical records, which means there are things they couldn't measure, like exactly how often seizures occurred, how well people took their medications, or what their daily habits were like. People given GLP-1s might also have had better access to care or other advantages that weren't captured in the data. Because of that, the authors describe their findings as hypothesis generating, meaning they show a pattern worth studying in the future, but not something doctors should act on today. Still, for people living with both epilepsy and type 2 diabetes, two conditions that can make day-to-day life especially challenging, this research offers a hopeful early sign. It suggests that GLP-1 medications could someday play a bigger role in brain health than anyone expected. But for now, the message from the authors and from Epilepsy is clear. This is an exciting signal, not a treatment recommendation. More research is needed, and the next step will have to be clinical trials that test these medications directly in people with epilepsy.
So it gives them good directions for future studies in epilepsies and GLP-1s. Inflammation was mentioned, inflammation in the brain. We know GLP-1s help with inflammation all over the body, so it's great news for
Well, it's exciting because it's another one of these studies that is looking back at large data sets,
right.
And we're discovering things now that could have never been discovered from those large data sets.
Yeah, and it gives researchers something to base future studies on. In story number 10, an Indian court has handed a major victory to generic drug makers and potentially opened up the global supply of one of the world's most in-demand medications. Late last week, the Delhi High Court cleared Dr. Reddy's laboratories to manufacture and export generic versions of semaglutide, the active ingredient in Ozempic and Wegovy. The decision applies only to exports sent to countries where semaglutide patents have already expired. The ruling centers on Novo Nordisk's patent strategy. The court determined that the company's newer semaglutide-specific patent was invalid because the active ingredient had already been claimed in an earlier genus patent. The court viewed the newer filing as an attempt to extend exclusivity, known as patent evergreening. As a result, Dr. Reddy's can begin exporting semaglutide now, though sales inside India will remain prohibited until the domestic patent expires next March. The timing is notable. Novo Nordisk's semaglutide patent is set to expire in Canada in early 2026, meaning Canada is poised to become one of the first major markets where generic semaglutide may legally enter. India's ruling could accelerate the global conversation about how quickly and where generics will emerge as patents fall country by country. Globally, the implications are significant. Semaglutide is now a foundational treatment for type 2 diabetes and increasingly for obesity. Many countries have struggled not with availability but with affordability, as high prices have limited access for millions. Lower cost generics manufactured at scale in India could shift that equation, especially in low and middle income nations. The development also raises regulatory questions outside India. It remains to be seen how U.S. regulators will react to the ruling, particularly as policymakers weigh long-term costs for GLP-1 medications and anticipate the first wave of true generics once patents eventually expire in the U.S. For the global GLP-1 landscape, this moment signals a turning point. Long-standing patent protections are beginning to face real pressure, and some are starting to give way.
So, it's one of those stories of people go, well, that's in India, why do I care?
They can't even sell it in India yet because the patent's still valid. So an Indian manufacturer is going to, I guess, try to export it to Canada once the patent
anywhere in the world where
expires.
the patents are expired.
I mean, is Canada the first place where it will expire?
I think it's the closest place to us. I don't know that it's specifically the first place, but...
And that's just because somebody at Novo forgot to refile for the...
Or chose not to. We don't really know we don't know the why. We simply know they
why.
did. We did a whole story on that. You can go back and find as well. Story number 11, Structure Therapeutics released new clinical trial data today for its once-daily oral GLP-1 Aleniglipron, and the numbers are significant enough to put this drug in the spotlight. This pill is designed for adults living with obesity or overweight plus a related medical condition, and the company just completed multiple mid-stage studies that together tracked more than 380 participants across the program. The main Phase 2b study enrolled 230 adults and followed them for 36 weeks. Everyone started at a low 5 milligram dose and slowly titrated up to 45 milligrams, 90 milligrams, or 120 milligrams once daily. By the end of the study, the highest dose produced an average 12.1% total body weight loss, which is roughly 27.3 pounds compared to just 0.8% in the placebo group. The placebo-adjusted effect is 11.3%, which is a very strong result for an oral drug. Weight loss response rates were also notable. At the 120 milligram dose, 86% of people lost at least 5% of their body weight, and 70% lost at least 10% of their body weight. Even blood sugar and blood pressure improved, with systolic blood pressure dropping between 6.4 and 7.5 milligrams, and an HbA1c falling between 0.28% and 0.3%, even though this was not a diabetes study. A separate exploratory study called Access 2 enrolled 85 participants and tested even higher doses, 120 milligrams, 180 milligrams, and 240 milligrams. At 36 weeks, the highest dose produced 14.2% total weight loss. And when adjusted against placebo, the number is 15.3%, or about 35.5 pounds. Importantly, researchers say the weight loss curve never flattened. There was no plateau at week 36, which means weight loss was still trending downward. Side effects matched what we expect from GLP-1 therapies. Across the main study, 10.4% of participants stopped treatment because of side effects, mostly nausea and vomiting. But another study may change how this drug is dosed. In a separate body composition study of 71 adults, participants started at a much lower 2.5 milligram dose and titrated monthly. With that gentler approach, there were 0 early discontinuations at 2.5 milligrams or 5 milligrams. The open-label extension that followed the main trial saw the same result, no discontinuations at the low starting dose, and continued weight loss through 44 weeks, again without a plateau. Safety signals looked clean across all studies. There were no cases of drug-induced liver injury, no persistent liver enzyme problems, and no QTc heart rhythm issues. Structure Therapeutics plans to meet with the FDA in early 2026 and begin phase 3 trials by mid-year. Those studies are expected to evaluate doses up to 240 milligrams using the lower 2.5 milligram starting schedule that eliminated earlier treatment dropouts in the extension and body composition studies. If these results are confirmed in larger trials, Aleniglipron could expand the treatment landscape with a once-daily oral option that delivers double-digit weight loss and a tolerability profile similar to injectable GLP-1 medications. It would not replace the current drugs on the market, but it could offer another practical and scalable pathway for people who need long-term support.
Aleniglipron.
Yep.
So
another hard to say one.
Another potential daily weight loss pill. Still in trials.
Well, if the earlier story we talked about with the FDA eliminating some of the levels, right?
It could go through approval process faster
Yeah.
once it was
maybe it doesn't
to the
even
FDA.
need phase 3.
Yeah, it's great news. There's more drugs coming. There are more drugs in the pipeline for sure.
And what I tell people when we quote these numbers, because they're like, oh, well, that's not a very high number. That's not a very high number. Well, I can speak to my personal experience. So if you look at tirzepatide, they say 18 to 20% body weight loss is what the average is from the trials. Well, I've lost 38% of my body weight.
I think I've lost 25. So yeah, it's your results may vary, but hopefully those results are kind of a baseline.
Until we see it in the field and know what happens, who knows?
Yeah.
It's a good option.
Story number 12, this holiday season, one of the most unexpected symbols of the GLP-1 era is showing up not in pharmacies, but on Christmas trees. According to a report from The Guardian, retailers in the UK and the US are seeing a surge in demand for novelty ornaments shaped like weight loss syringes, including glitter-covered Ozempic-style pens, and shoppers can't get enough of them. One Glasgow homeware shop told the paper that customers aren't just buying one, they're buying 3 or 4 at a time. It's a strange cultural moment, and it reflects just how deeply GLP-1 medications have entered the public consciousness. What began as a quiet medical breakthrough has become a full-blown pop culture phenomenon. Ozempic jokes dominate late-night TV. GLP-1 focused groceries fill supermarket shelves. And now holiday trees are getting their own semaglutide makeover. Retailers say the shift is part of a larger trend. Traditional boxed ornament sets have fallen by more than half over the past decade, while sales of quirky, standalone baubles are up. People want decorations that say something about who they are and what their year looked like. And in 2025, that increasingly includes weight loss medications. Shops are stocking ornaments shaped like Botox syringes, iced coffees, jars of olives, pasta bowls, martinis, even air fryers. The Ozempic ornament was so popular at some stores, including Selfridges, that it sold out early in the season. Designers interviewed in the reporting say they're simply reflecting real life. They watch trends, track social media, study what people are buying, and turn those cultural flashpoints into tiny glass collectibles. One ornament designer called these creations personal story tokens, explaining that customers want trees that feel individual rather than traditional or generic. The GLP-1 ornament trend also speaks to how mainstream these medications have become. Millions of people around the world are using semaglutide or tirzepatide, and many of them say the drugs have been life-changing. For better or worse, mass culture has decided to mark that moment, even if it's in the form of a glitter-dipped injection pen hanging beside Rudolph and a snowman. At the same time, some people see the ornaments as tacky or insensitive, especially for those who live with obesity as a chronic disease rather than a punchline. Others view them as playful, a reflection of a year when weight loss science became household conversation. Whether people love them or hate them, the trend underscores something important. GLP-1 medications have moved far beyond the doctor's office. They've reshaped food culture, public policy, social media, insurance debate, and now apparently holiday decor. This year, the angels and glass stars are sharing space with Ozempic needles, and while it may be a novelty, it's also a reminder of just how much the conversation around obesity treatment has changed.
What do you think? Would you hang one on your tree?
Well, then you'd have to explain it to your whole family that might come over and see
Well,
it.
our whole family knows. We have secrets, you know.
I mean, what do we have on our tree? We have cat-shaped ornaments. We have ornaments the children have made. We have ornaments with
things.
pictures, college mascots.
Do you still have your prior employers' ornaments?
I think I got rid of those.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a reflection of our family, I guess.
Yeah. That wraps up this edition of the Downsized News. If you're looking for tools and ideas to help on your GLP-1 adventure, head over to thedownsized.org. You'll find links to our GLP-1 Amazon store, our Downsized email list, and even details about our 2026 Downsized at Sea cruise.
Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you stay informed on all the GLP-1 news. We explain the science in plain English and share what's really happening with us as we continue our own GLP-1 adventures. I'm Laraine Durham.
And I'm Christopher Durham, and we are the Downsized.